where they act like they're super elite and better than you, and it's a soft bigotry of low expectations, but they still don't want you in their cafes, right? The idea being, they talk about how wonderful and how nice they are for letting all these people in, and then push them into a ghetto and say, look at all the people we brought in from these poor countries. We're such good people. And then those people are poor and hungry, and they're not allowed to, they struggle to find work. They struggle for education. They're treated like foreigners in the country they were born in, the children of these migrants. And the Swedish people act like they're, all high and mighty. And this results in the obvious. One of the biggest problems, one of the most annoying things I have with race realists and the racists in this regard is that they're like, see, the Somalians are coming here. That proves blah, 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 blah. No. What this proves is that Sweden, a wealthy society that exports weapons to make their money, took a bunch of poor refugees, crammed them into a ghetto, and offered them very little and said, you're on your own. And then the people in Sweden, these regressive baitsua means like, for those that aren't familiar, it's a Chinese word that refers to people who care more about their appearance and pretend to be for social justice. There's a longer explanation, but they basically talk about how we're all for helping these people. Yes, then stop cramming them in ghettos and basically creating these pockets of poverty. If there's one thing we know is true, it's that poverty breeds crime. And if you create these areas where you force these people into these ghettos, and then they struggle to find work, they can't pay their rent, so they turn to crime, you can't then turn around and get all racist about it. Certainly, traits can be inherited. I'm not a scientist on this matter. I'm not a scientist, especially not a biologist. But I've read a lot about this, and there's a lot of intelligent people who I respect in this capacity. But it really frustrates me when, regardless of what your thoughts are on, the people from wherever, there's one thing that's simple, and it's that Sweden is not doing. Okay, hold on, let me stop. They may have been changing this, over the past few years to rectify this problem. But I want to make sure I stress the problems we're seeing with grenade attacks specifically, as they mention in this Wikipedia article, that it is gang members who are mainly first and second generation immigrants, and they're being ignored. Why don't you just be honest about it? One of the reasons is a lot of people told me that they were scared of perpetuating racism or whatever. And it's like, dude, if you were honest, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Perhaps you can tell people how you took neighborhoods, put everybody in there at once, and then what do you think people are going to do? They talk to each other in their native tongue. And because of this, it's harder for them to learn the language. They don't integrate. They don't make friends. They have no connections to the outside society. So they reject it. And I don't blame them. It's like someone, lets you in the house and then puts you in the basement and says you're on your own. It's like, well, dude, don't be surprised if they're going to go up to the kitchen and take some of your food if they're hungry, right? I'm not trying to justify any of the crime or the gang violence by no means. I'm trying to talk about how this is a systemic problem of faux social justice. And this is why I get, so frustrated by many people on the left in this regard. And they're emboldening, the far right, the alt right, whatever you want to call it. Because on the surface, it's really easy to point to the migrants and refugees and say, aha, they're a refugee. Therefore, that proves it. It's like, no. They're doing the right thing now by spreading people out. That way, the people will be in the community. They'll get the education they deserve, and you can't just push people out. Sweden's got a long way to go, and terrifyingly, it sounds like in the first 3 months of this year, things are worse than they've ever been, more so than any other year before it. And we're gonna keep hearing about this, and you're gonna hear both sides pulling as hard as they can to prove one thing or another. Actually, I'd be willing to bet the left doesn't talk about it at all. Because you got a lot of these. Let's point to California. This is a perfect example of why I point the finger at corruption in the Democratic Party. I don't think the issue is entirely Democrat or liberal policy. Although I certainly think it's fair to point to it on the surface and say, well, look, if you it didn't work, maybe there's a problem you should look into. That's why I'm a moderate, leaning a little to the left. I have no problem pointing to somebody who enacted a policy that failed. One of the problems of government is that the programs don't die when they fail, and they should. Businesses, they don't work, they fail. Government don't work, they just ask for more money and put a Band-Aid on it. But it doesn't mean government is always bad. It doesn't mean it can't work. We definitely need a lot of these programs, and they can do good things. The problem is you get these politicians who put on a fake smile, and they talk about, we're going to do all these great things to help people. You get them elected, and then what happens in California? Okay, we got a housing bill. We got a bunch of homeless people. And they go, yeah, not in my backyard. Ah, and there it is. See, here's the thing. Democrats like campaigning on emotion. And it's really easy to manipulate people's emotions. I'm not saying Republicans don't campaign on emotion. But Democrats really, really go for the poor marginalized babies, and Republicans are much, much more callous. Not trying to say that to be disrespectful, but you go to CPAC and what do they say? Personal responsibility. It's your responsibility. And that is, to a certain extent, more callous than what the Democrats are doing. So I have respect for the real Democrats, like the real people on the left who are saying, I really do want to help. What's the right way to do it? And both sides know the old idiom, if you teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for the rest of his life. And that's what's not being done, okay? So the real solution for me, it's like, hey, we could do a government program to fix all these problems, but there's nuance and it's complicated. It's not black or white. You can't just throw people into a ghetto and be like, problem solved. Yeah, because 10, 20 years later, those kids go out and they say, I can't get school. I can't get work. What am I supposed to do? And then they resent the Swedish government and they say, you know what? We're not part of your society. And it's the fault of the lazy politicians who kick the can down the road and act like they've done something. Someone walks up and says, hey, there's litter on the ground. And they kick it and say, what litter? Yeah, you didn't get rid of the litter. You just kicked it down the road for other people to deal with later. And that's the problem. You really want to help these people, education, integration, language programs. It's more than just taking them in. And this is what Sweden is now dealing with. So you know what? My information on Sweden is a couple years outdated. They may have started implementing a lot of programs. I don't want to just drag them over what they're doing now because I'm not entirely familiar with what they're doing now. But what I can say is when I was there in 2017, we were talking to, I believe it was the mayor of Södertälje, who said, yes, they're now spreading people out so they can integrate better and get better access to resources, and we can prevent these problems. And that is respectable. That is wonderful. And that's what they should be doing. But now they're going to have to reckon with their faux social justice. Letting people in and putting them in ghettos is not helping anybody. And this is why I can throw it back to the American immigration crisis, the southern border. Listen, the left doesn't understand this. If you just let people in, what you see in Sweden is what we get here. People need access to society. They need access to resources. They need to be placed in positions where the economy can handle it. And this is what blows my mind. They're like, oh no, defund ICE. We shouldn't do all these things. Like, do you have any idea what would happen if we weren't helping those people trying to come in and stopping, too many? Here's what I would say. Everybody in the world is welcome here in the U.S. so long as they all follow the legal process. You know why? Because then we can make sure growth works in a way that makes sense. Now, obviously, I think at a certain point it just wouldn't work. Like, I don't literally think 7 plus 8 billion people are going to be able to fit in the U.S. What I'm saying is everybody needs to go through a process so that we can say, okay, we don't want you to be poor, we don't want you to be sick, and we don't want you in a ghetto. That's what will happen if we do nothing. So let's take your name down, figure out where you need to go and what you need so we can help you properly. Otherwise, it's going to be bad for everybody. And there you go. There's Sweden. I'll leave it there. I could rant on this for another half an hour, but I'll leave it. Thanks for watching. I'll have more stories, next story at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I'll see you then.